Want to welcome everybody again to this evening's beef program. And we're privileged tonight to have Dr. Les Anderson joining us this evening to lead this discussion. And guess what, Dr. Van Valen? You're exactly right. The Facebook Live kicked me back out, so we will not be doing that. But this evening, Dr. Anderson is going to share some information that's kind of timely as we move into the spring breeding season. And most of you know Dr. Anderson, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time introducing him. I'll just let him go ahead and start rolling on in his presentation. Dr. Anderson, take it away, buddy.
Sounds great. Can you see that?
Yes, sir. Looks good.
All right. Zoom is requesting to bypass the system private window picker. I don't have any idea what that is.
I've
Do you have
never
any?
heard of a window picker.
I guess I'll allow it. So if there's anybody picking my windows, I'm in trouble, I guess. All right. Thanks everybody for showing up. It's a pleasure to be here talking with folks about organizing the breeding season. Very popular topic that I give, and I hope I have a little bit different slant on it tonight and provide um, a little bit different look at the exact same information, just to be completely honest with you. But it is March, obviously, and even though most of the spring calvers are just now getting either at the start of the calving season or at least within 2 or 3 weeks of it, believe it or not, right now is when we need to start preparing to have great reproductive success. Uh, excuse me, this spring. And so what I've done is I've broken this down into a little checklist. I love to do lists. I think I kind of live on it. A lot of people, a lot of us live on checklists. So I made little checklists for us to look at as we move between now and the start of the breeding season in May. And if you're a fall calver, just add about 6 months to everything that we're going to talk about. There are 6 things that we need to check off of our list, and by far and away the most important, and something that isn't quite done enough. If you look at the USDA NOMS latest survey, which is in 2020 or 21, it indicated that less than 20% of us get breeding soundness exams done on our bull. And if you're not averse to a little risk, that's okay. It's not a requirement, certainly, to get it done, but the breeding soundness exams in bulls are our main risk management tool in reproduction. I I need to keep track of this, and I just need to keep better notes. But I have to get somewhere between 20 and 25 calls every year about complete failures in pregnancy. And I just dealt with one, worked with one earlier this week, late last week, excuse me. And what it boiled down to is the bull that had passed the BSE previously had failed, and you know they hadn't gotten it tested in about 2 years, and the bull had gone bad. And so, number one on our checklist is breeding soundness exams on our bulls. If you have a controlled breeding and calving season, I highly recommend that you do a BSE before about 30 days before every breeding season. Okay. And so you're like, well, I've got spring and fall, and I just checked him in March. I'm sure he's going to be good in November. It's taking a risk. It's 50 to $100 to ensure that bull has an opportunity to breed cows. There's a lot of things that can happen that we can't see, and that prevents us from predicting whether or not that bull is going to be an excellent breeder. One great example is health. Okay. And especially if a bull has a high fever. One that is a normal situation in Kentucky, but maybe not so much this year's foot rot. quite a bit of research done on foot rot. And if you catch it early, okay, there's only a 1 to 2 week reduction in fertility. But if the bull is allowed to be infected, because it's an infection or a bacterial infection in the hoof, and that ultimately results in fever in the bull. If that bull is allowed to have that fever for 2 straight days, it can render that bull totally infertile for 60 days. So any illness, whether it's respiratory, foot rot, any illness that elevates body temperature for 2 degrees, 2 straight days, renders them 2 months infertile. Now, certainly if a bull has foot rot or if he has respiratory and you have to treat it, that's something that you can see and something that you can anticipate. So then as soon as that bull gets done with that, you can go ahead and test him. And if it was a long enough infection, you're going to have to test him again 60 days later, or go ahead and cut your losses and switch the bull out. Other things that you can't see are injury, and in particular, injuries to the penis, to the sheath, to the prepuce. Sometimes bulls can get stepped on, and we don't actually pay attention to that, and you can't see the swelling in the testy. And so, really, are you positive that he didn't get hurt? Do you know for a fact that he's still able to breed cows? And I'll just give you a personal example here. About 20 years ago, my dad and my cousin Alan were running cattle together. Alan was a fall calver, Dad was a spring calver. Alan, because he was able to use Dad's bull power, Dad ran several cows and Alan just had about 70. Alan borrowed Dad's bulls. Alan saw the bull breed a cow, and every 21 days he was rotating bulls out, and they go to load the bull up, and there's a cow in heat, and the bull jumps the cow but doesn't breed the bull, or doesn't breed the cow. Seems odd. I got in that weekend. Dad said something about it. We went out and looked at the bull. Couldn't tell anything at all. The sheath wasn't swollen. The nowhere around the penis was swollen at all. There wasn't anything going on. But I said, hey, let's just run him into the vet and check. Let's just check it anyway. Okay. So we take it into our local vet, and the bull had actually cut his penis when he was breeding a cow a day or two ago. And when our veterinarian ran his fingers up the sheath, pus ran out. Okay. And if we hadn't gotten that bull checked, he would have been completely infertile, and it's something that we couldn't visibly see. And so unless you're 100% positive that he didn't get hurt and that he wasn't sick in any way, you're taking a risk. And then also, bulls just go infertile. Okay. And most of the time it's not a trickle down thing. Most of the time it's kind of all or nothing. So a bull will be cranking along, doing great, breeding cows, 3-4 years old, and somewhere in that 5-year-old range, boom, he falls off the table. And it's really, most of the time it's kind of an all or nothing thing. So I highly recommend that you do a BSE 30 days before every breeding season. And if you've got one breeding season, do it at least once a year and pay attention to your bulls as they're breeding cows. Check number 1. Get your breeding soundness exam done. Schedule it with your veterinarian. Contact your local county agent and see if you have a county bull check days. I was in Grant County last night. They've got one coming up on April 19th. So check with your local extension agent. See if there's a county bull check day. Get the BSE done in your bulls. Number 2, vaccinate. We got to make sure that our cows are protected. They have enough their immune levels are high enough to overcome any challenges that might occur during or immediately after the breeding season. I highly recommend that we vaccinate our cows, and we want to get that done 60 days before the start of the breeding season. So if the start of your breeding season is May 20th, that's coming up here really quick. That's in a week or two. We want to get those vaccinations done. Well, what if my cow hasn't calved yet? That's okay. You can go ahead and vaccinate late pregnant cows, it kind of boosts the immunity and boosts their colostrum anyway. If you're too late into the window for the respiratory disease complex, and that's really the one that we need to make sure is 60 days ahead of time, then go ahead and give your Lepto with Harjo bovis and your Vibrio, okay, and you can boost your weaning or boost your respiratory disease complex at weaning or preg check in those cows, and just kind of move your annual booster to preg check. And what I do now, the folks that I deal with, mainly what we do now is we will give the Lepto, Vibrio prior to the breeding season. And then when we come in and preg check somewhere in that 90 to 120 day window, we'll hit the cows with our respiratory disease complex and to protect them to the middle in this third period of pregnancy. Modified lives are what we prefer, particularly if you're dealing with yearling heifers, and we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But modified lives absolutely give us a better immune response. And when we follow up with killed viruses after that original immunity is established, we actually get an additional bump there. So plan to get your cows vaccinated. Okay, you'll want to work with your herd veterinarian and get that scheduled and get that worked up for your area. If you happen to notice that you have maybe a little bit higher level of abortion than normal, then you definitely want to get your veterinarian out and look to see if you can identify if there happens to be any subclinical issues with BVD or lepto that's stimulating some abortions. I just had 2 calls about this in the last couple of weeks where people they're just having problems with early pregnancy, and so somewhere in that 25 to 45 day range where they're kicking pregnancies out. Okay, and when that's happening, when you see stuff that's going on that's a little unusual, go ahead and contact your veterinarian and start checking the boxes for your health program to make sure that your cattle are being protected against diseases. Some sources of abortifacients you really got to pay attention to are deer and coons. We have several examples of folks that have worked with us where cattle have been drinking the groundwater, or the raccoons have been in the hay barns and defecating on the hay and so forth. And those two animals are vectors for our abortifacients, and we need to make sure that we're protected against that. We just set up with a local veterinarian, and one of the people that called me that actually they're going to bump up their vaccinations to 3 times a year because they're having additional problems with lepto. And so make sure you contact your herd veterinarian. So what's the normal abortion rate? You should be looking at 2% or less in cattle that are well protected and not exposed to additional challenges. Number 3, evaluate the nutrient status of your cow herd. This is the perfect time. Either fall or spring, now is the perfect time to evaluate the nutrient status. If your cows are calving in your spring calving herd, what we don't want to see is this cow on the left. Body condition score at calving dictates return to estrus in cows. Okay, so in our spring calving herd, if we've got a cow that's just calved, and then these pictures were taken by Dr. Burris down at Princeton. This cow was getting ready to calve. You can see just a little bit of udder there, and this was her body condition score. If you look at her hooks, very sharp over the hooks, sharp over the pins, sharp over the transverse and spinous processes. You can see every rib. You can see some definition of the scapula and the shoulder area. There's some leather down here, but there's no fat in the brisket. This cow has a body condition score 3, which is much, much, much too low for calving. And what that's going to result in is 4 to 5 months of anestrus. So if she calved March 1st and she's 4 months, you're looking at April 1st, May 1st, June 1st, July 1st before she even begins to cycle. That's trouble. That's trouble for our ability to get her rebred, because when we get to July and August, our conception rate drops down to 30 to 35%, and her pregnancy opportunity potential for next year is near zero. On the other hand, if we look at the cow on the right, this is a cow that's in pretty much ideal body condition score. And maybe Dr. Lemcooler might think she's a little bit over conditioned, but I like to see a lot of smoothness here over the hooks, a little bit of buildup, a little bit of pone here around the tail head, flat and fat covered over the spine here in the paralumbar fossa. Come up here around in the ribs and you see no ribs. Okay, so she's nice and fleshy there and carrying about a ½ inch of back fat maybe there, and come down into the brisket, and she's got got a little bit of fat down in the brisket. I would call this cow body condition score 6, and if she calves March 1st, then she's probably going to start to cycle somewhere between April 15th and May 1st, and if she's a 2-year-old, it might be just a little bit later than that, somewhere around maybe May 10th, but she's going to start cycle before or very close to the start of the breeding season. And if they're coming into heat, particularly in May and June, when our conception rates are very high, then her pregnancy potential is going to be excellent. Now, for your fall calvers, you're getting close to weaning or thinking about weaning sometime in the next, either in March or April. Now's a great time to evaluate body condition score 2. If you happen to catch a cow here in body condition score 3 and you've got several of them, you can sort them off, give them a little bit more feed to get them into that 4.5, maybe 5. Oh, sorry, Dr. Lemcooler, that was a half. But getting up close to 5 maybe before she comes into grass, so that she'll calve at a body condition score 6 come September. So number 3, evaluate the nutrient status of your cow herd. It completely dictates estrus and cyclicity, and cattle have a very, very, very difficult time getting pregnant when they're not coming into heat. Number 4, prepare your replacements. Again, we are moving towards that May 20th or even May 1st bull turnout dates or synchronization dates for our cattle, for our heifers. And so right now is the optimum time to start to plan to make sure that our heifers have the highest probability possible to conceive early in their first breeding season. Our number one goal in our heifer development program is to get these rascals bred as early as possible in the breeding season. Data from way back in the 60s, but then validated again from some data from Rick Funston out of Nebraska, demonstrates that the most important factor in heifer development is to get them bred early in their first calving season. As a matter of fact, in that original work from the it was published in 1973, but it was data collected in the 60s. Those authors actually said that heifers that conceive early as yearlings during the first breeding season actually appear to be programmed for productive lives. And if you think about it, if they calve early their first year, they're going to have more time to recover from that calving to get bred back their second year. And if they happen to catch in the middle to the beginning their second calf, then they're going to always calve early as a rule. And so they're going to be calving early and weaning older, heavier calves and become more productive cows. And so our number one goal for our heifer development program, and what you need to be considering right now as your heifers move towards that May 1st breeding, is to make sure that they're in body condition score 5, 5.5, closing in on 6, and reaching their target weight. Okay. Couple of things that we can consider to maximize their breeding potential. Number one, Dr. Bullock will be proud of me. We need to crossbreed. Crossbred females are simply more fertile than straight breds. They have longer, they're younger at puberty. They get pregnant earlier as heifers, and they have higher lifetime productivities as cows. So crossbreeding is the number one thing that we can do to maximize breeding potential in our females. The second thing we need to do is we need to feed to target weight. And our target weight needs to be around 65% of what you think their mature weight's going to be. And I'm going to pretend that our mature cow size is 1,200 pounds because it's easy math. And so 3/4 of that, or 2/3 of that, excuse me, is about 800 pounds. And so a month before the breeding season, so coming up around April the 1st, we want those heifers to reach their target weight, because when they're at their target weight, they initiate puberty and they begin to cycle. Because again, we cannot get cattle pregnant if they're not coming into heat. And so we have to regulate estrus, and we have to limit the anestrus as much as possible. The two ways we do that with our heifers is crossbreeding and feeding to our target weight. And I know some of you, if you follow Beef Magazine, there's been a lot of work out in Nebraska that suggests that we can cut that target weight down to 53 to 55%. And we've tried that in various spots here. I personally have tried it with producers, and we've tried it here at the University Farm a little bit, and it doesn't work for our breed types in our environment like it does for those folks out in Nebraska. Another thing we got to do, and we've already checked this off our list, is we need to vaccinate. We need to make sure these heifers are healthy, and you can set them up for a healthy lifetime as heifers. And so what we like to see you do is to hit them with a killed virus prior to weaning, hit them with modified live for respiratory at weaning, boost according to label, then come back about 60 to 90 days before their first breeding season and boost them again. And so we are right at that limit. If you haven't gotten that last respiratory in for your heifers, get it in now. Killed viruses are fine, but we want to stay in that 45 to 60 day window, even with a killed respiratory disease complex. So that's IBR, BVD, PI3, so forth. The lepto we can push up a little bit closer to the breeding if we need to, but I don't really like to see that any closer than 30 days either. Okay. And the last thing that we need to consider is we need to think about ways to synchronize heat in these females. And if you think about it, if our goal is to maximize the proportion of females that calve early in the calving season, then we have to maximize the proportion of females that get pregnant early in the breeding season. To maximize that, we have to maximize the proportion of females in heat early. And the best way to do that is to control estrus and to synchronize it with one of many different protocols. For natural breeding, and I absolutely recommend you synchronize everything on the farm. Doesn't matter if it's a heifer or a cow, 2-year-old, whatever. It makes production efficiency sense to go ahead and get heat in those animals as early as we possibly can, because that increases the number of opportunities they have to conceive during the breeding season. And so we want to maximize heat early in the breeding season as often as we can. For heifers, you can either feed MGA for 7 days or put a CEDAR device in for 7 days before you turn out the bull. If you've done a really, really good job with your heifer development and they're at a solid body condition score 6, as you're getting ready to begin their first breeding season, I would recommend you include a shot of prostaglandin at the end of the CEDAR or the MGA. What the CEDAR and MGA do is they stimulate estrus in anestrus females. Doesn't really do anything for a cycling female. If you've done your job developing heifers and they've hit their target weight and their target body condition score a month before the breeding season and they're already cycling, then MGA and CEDAR doesn't really do a whole lot for them. what we need to do then is give prostaglandin. So Lutalyse, Estramate, a prostaglandin product. And just to cover all bases, again, if you're into risk mitigation like I am, feed them MGA or put a cedar in for 7 days, then hit them with Lut on the day that you stop feeding or the day you pull the cedar, and that'll maximize the proportion of the heifers that are in heat early in the breeding season. If you're going to AI, and I highly recommend that you AI your heifers, I would suggest that you use AI sires with an acceptable calving ease EPD with the highest accuracy you can get. And so I think heifer acceptable for British breeds is somewhere in that 25% range. So you can look at bulls that are in that 25, top 25, 20 to 25%. And if they're at 90+% accuracy, that's what you're going to get when you breed to them. And so you can be assured that calving ease from a genetic standpoint is not going to be a problem. And so I highly recommend that you use high accuracy bulls with acceptable calving ease EPDs. It's not really necessary to choose the absolute highest calving ease EPD possible. And so in other words, if you got the choice between a 10 in Angus and a 20 in Angus, there's not much practical difference there. Okay, and so find one that meets the heifer guidelines that Dr. Bullock has created and has worked with the Ag Development Board, the K program. Follow those calving ease guidelines and use the highest accuracy bull you can find. Then the system that I like is this 5-day cedar, 5-day prostaglandin plus cedar. So you put the cedar in, and I'm just going to say on a Monday, then you pull the cedar out on Saturday. So it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Give a shot of Lut. I always put patches on here, the heat detection patches. So if that's on Saturday, so Sunday, Monday, everything that's got a red patch, I go ahead and breed sometime during the day on Monday. And then we finish up all the rest of the heifers first thing in the morning on Tuesday. And that system has worked pretty well for us. It's very simple. Our pregnancy rates have been very good, somewhere between 55 and 65%. And so that's the system that we use, and that's the one that I typically recommend for heifers. Second thing that we need to do with our heifers is to manage our calving ease. We've talked about using high accuracy calving ease EPD sires. And that is our number one tool to use for reducing calving problems. We want to concentrate on it because females that experience calving problems are 16% less likely to conceive. So you're losing pregnancies when they experience even a couple hours of labor. So that 90-minute mark is really the cutoff that a lot of the data shows where pregnancy rate starts to decline. So if that cow's in intense stage 2 labor for more than 90 minutes, the data suggests that you go ahead and pull that calf, and that increases the likelihood of that cow to rebreed in the next season. Also, we want to cull heifers that have inadequate pelvic areas. Now, this inadequate pelvic area accounts for about 9 to 10% of the problems with calving in cattle, where 50 to 60% of it can be attributed directly to calving ease. And so if you're going to do anything, choose bulls with acceptable proven calving ease, and then to stack the deck to risk mitigate, do a pelvic area measurement. Just to remind you guys, this is a Rice pelvimeter, and there's also a little hydraulic one that can be used, but schedule your veterinarian and they'll come out and they will do the height and the width of the opening of the pelvic canal. Okay, ignore that. That's the vertebrae. I don't know why they drew that in there like that. But anyhow, you multiply those two numbers together. And so typically we'll get like a 14 by 12, which is 168. And then there's some conversion factors available in tables in our fact sheets that you can use to calculate whether or not a cow can have a calf of reasonable size. And so what we usually do, Dr. Van Valen and us up here at Woodford, we usually choose 70 pounds. And so you take 70 times 2.3, that's going to be in that 160 range. And that's gonna get us in the acceptable range for pelvic area. Number 5, develop a plan for your 2-year-olds. Okay. And so a must for your 2-year-olds, other than calving them out at condition score 6, is that we have to control estrus. 2-year-olds simply require 30 days longer, 20 to 30 days longer to return to estrus than mature cows do. And so estrus becomes a huge problem. So we need to induce or synchronize estrus either using short-term calf removal, which means if May 20th is the day at the start of the calving season, we'll pull the calves off, the late calving cows and the 2-year-olds on May 20th, put them back on May 22nd, and that will induce 80 to 100% of those cows to come into heat. If you don't want to go through that, you can put a CEDAR device in for 7 days right before you turn the bull out, and you'll see some data in just a minute how effective that is. So a must for 2-year-olds is to induce estrus, because if you sit and wait on them to come into heat, you're going to be waiting a long time, and often longer than what's necessary for efficient, productive management. Number 6, and this is the one that's going to take the most amount of time, and I've been trying to fly through the rest of this to get to number 6. But what I highly recommend you do is to start now planning for profit. And you're probably looking at that going, good night. 5-weight calves are bringing $3 a pound or a little bit more. You got to be an idiot not to profit now. That's true. Right now, money's pretty good in cattle. But also right now is when we have to plan to be profitable every year, even when the market declines. And this is the ideal time when the market's high to make the corrections we need so that we can survive when the market dips again. And I hope it doesn't go back down, but it's going to go down. It's been the history of the beef industry. Prices are going to go back down, and let's plan to profit now. Because, we need to make our bag, right? When the prices are good, we need to make our bag so that we can put a little money away, pay some bills, and organize ourselves for when prices aren't so good. First thing you got to consider when you're making that plan for profit is how in the world are you going to market cattle? And I know this is a subject that's come up several times in these discussions in the webinar, but the reproductive plan should directly be reflected in the marketing plan. Directly. So how are you going to make money? Are you selling feeder calves? Are you selling replacement heifers? Are you selling freezer beef? Are you a seed stock operator? Do you make your money in show ring? It doesn't matter how you profit. Just identify it and then set up your production scheme, and in particular your reproductive plan, so that your cattle best fit the way that you can make money. And I used to kind of pound in the ground that everybody had to control the breeding and calving season. Over the last 27 years, I've learned that that's not really necessary. If your marketing plan reflects profitable production in that longer calving season. Most of us are feeder calf producers, and so to do that, we need to really pay a lot of attention to our reproductive management program. This is our normal plan, right? And I've shown this slide 100 times, and it's probably not that effective anymore, but somehow we get some property, we inherit it, we rent it, whatever. we decide that we want some biological bush hogs, so we buy some cows. And to get these calves, we have to buy a bull, and I'm giving us credit that we're crossbreeding. And then whenever we want to pay a bill, we pull off a calf or two, take them to the stockyards, and we get our check. That's the normal plan. That runs probably 60 to 65% of the producers in the state of Kentucky and 55% of the producers in the entire United States. Okay, so what's wrong with this plan? Well, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not the way to maximize your profit potential and to maximize your sustainability in the beef cattle industry. I love to go on farms, and you know, I don't take as good of notes as I should, but I have. We did spend quite a bit of time on farms in the 2010 to 2000, right until right before COVID, and we kept fairly decent notes. And this is an example of what happens when we have the random plan that I just showed. We have 27, and this farm is an actual farm, had 27 cows. Out of that 27 cows, the year before we got there, he had 21 calves born. So 6 of those cows didn't calve. 5 of the calves died. And so he sold 16 calves out of 27 cows for a whopping 315 pounds of calf wean per cow exposed. And I would love to say that this is the outlier, but it's not. I mean, it's 1/3 of the people that I see to 40% look exactly like this. Okay. And if you're in the freezer beef business, this might not be so bad. This way you kind of spread out your cash flow, you spread out your kill dates, you spread out everything because you're controlling your market. You're controlling the cost, you're controlling the endpoint. But when you're in a feeder calf market, this is killer. Because how are you going to market these rascals? Well, you're going to market them 1, 2, 3 at a time, and they're going to be sorted off as singles, and you're going to get the lowest possible value for a calf at the stockyards. Now, I hope you're thinking, well, I'll just put them in CPH or I'll put them in another tag sale. And that's why those, the CPH was developed, was for this problem. Not as many people as we would like participated in CPH or those tag programs. And so this ends up being a problem for a lot of our feeder calf producers. Well, what are some of the issues with that situation with random? There's actually some data. Okay, about 400 ranches in the Southwest. This data was done by the folks there at Oklahoma State. And their goal was to look at the economic relationship between the length of the calving season and productivity and profitability. And what they found was a positive relationship between the number of days of the breeding season and the cost of production. And what that means, as the number of days of the breeding season goes up, your cost of production goes up. So if you go from 60 to 90 days, the cost of production goes up. If you go from 60 to 120, your cost of production goes up. In those 400 ranches, they had everything from a 70-day breeding season to a 365-day breeding season, and multiple examples. There was 400 ranches. It cost them 23.5 cents per day of the calving season. Okay, per head. Their bottom line, the year-round calvers sold 46 fewer pounds at a cost of $14 more a hundredweight. So you're looking at $70 more a calf. So it costs you more and you sell less. That's the problem with the profitability and sustainability I was trying to make from the previous slide. We sell fewer pounds at a higher cost, and that doesn't even count the lower market value. Tom Troxel, University of Arkansas, published this work where he took 6 farms over a 5 year. Actually, it was all of them but one took 3 years. The one farm took 5 years, and transitioned them all down to 90 days. And you can see here the impact. Okay, they went from long calving to shorter calving. Not hardly, only half the cows calving in a good window to 92%. The calving percentage didn't change. So one of the arguments I always get was if I leave the bull in longer, ultimately they'll get pregnant. And it's actually not the case. It's the same. The herd break evens was a third lower. The specified cost, that's cash cost out of pocket per animal unit, so that's 1,000-pound cow-calf pair, was about half. And of course, if those are different, then his income over specified cash was about twice as much. So it didn't cost any money whatsoever to get a controlled breeding and calving season. It makes you money. It reduces your cost of production and increases your productivity. If you look at that data, you look at the data from all the IRM stuff at Iowa State, Illinois, North Dakota State, profitable feeder calf producers calve in a 60 to 70 day window. More than 90% of them get pregnant, and 87, 8% and above percent of them actually wean a calf. And so this is the number that really matters. We've got to get this percent calf crop weaned and the pounds of calf weaned per cow exposed up in that greater than 90% and greater than 450 or even 500 pounds if we can help it, if we want to be profitable. What are some of the tools that we can use? The number one tool is to determine pregnancy. That NOMS data from the USDA, less than 25% of cattlemen got pregnancy determined in their cow herd. Call your veterinarian. Get pregnancy determined in your cow herd so you can make sound management decisions. Another tool that we can use that goes along with pregnancy determination is culling, okay, and replacing. So once you determine pregnancy, you can sell the open or the later calving cows or just the bad cows. You would be amazed at how much better your herd's going to be if you take the bottom 25% off. So use the opportunity when you determine pregnancy to do a cull and replace so that you can eventually move to more efficient, more useful cows. And then beating this point into the ground, synchronize the estrus in everything that you can. Pregnancy determination is the key. Okay, get a hold of your veterinarians to get a palpation or ultrasonography done. If you don't have a herd veterinarian that's able to come out and get that done for you, we do have several blood tests that are available, both instant tests, and you can send it into Sandy or any of the UK labs and get that test done. And those can be very accurate. This is just an example of the chute side tests that are available from IDEXX right now. That one's pregnant. That one's pregnant. This one's open. Takes about 15 minutes to get that test. They're pretty accurate. I've had it more than 90-95% accurate as early as 30 days, and I highly recommend it. And again, it's the Alerts on-farm pregnancy test from IDEXX. To synchronize estrus, if you in your heifers, you can do either MGA or cedar. In your cows, we recommend a cedar for 7 days before we turn the bull out. You can either use melengesterol acetate, which is a feed additive, when fed at 0.5 milligram per head per day, effectively gives the cow the hormone that they need to induce cyclicity. You got to remember that if they're not eating it, it's not working. It can come in 100 different forms. You can get it in the powder and put it in your current feed, or you can buy a pellet or a cube. Works very well. It's not as potent as a cedar device, but it's more potent than nothing. This is the cedar device. It's the single best product available for use to improve profitability in the beef cattle industry. It stands for controlled internal drug release, and that powder that's on the outside of this plastic is the actual hormone, progesterone, that's needed to induce estrus. It does require handling the cattle a couple of times. You put it in, you pull it out 7 days later. So you put it in that tube, stick it in through the vulva into the anterior vagina, push the plunger, and those wings catch the vaginal wall and hold the device in the vagina. body fluids and soak up the hormone, and then when you pull the string and remove the device, they come into heat. I say 3 to 5 here, but it's really 2 to 5 days. Can be up to 7 days after removal. Just some data. MGA versus control. So each farm in this had MGA and control on the same farm. We had 1,200 cows there, about 800 cows here. 7 days, turn the bull out, increased pregnancy rate, increased the percentage of calf in the first 30 days. And our bull to cow ratio didn't matter, but we always used a mature bull that passed the BSE on every one of those farms. It increases profitability. At Eden Shale, we had 108 cows. Half of them got MGA before the bull. The other half got corn before the bull. Fed it the same energy and protein content. 95% of this group got pregnant. 80% of that group got pregnant. These calves were born 17 days earlier and weighed 40 more pounds. At that time, believe it or not, the MGA only cost us $3 a pound. And this is how many pounds were weaned out of the MGA group. That's how many pounds were weaned out of the corn group. I hope that's close to a current average steer and heifer price. I'm probably $20 off that. But if you take that times that, it's a pretty big number. Divide that by the number of cows, and that's an additional $320 return on your small investment in that project. Two big problems we have. We talk about the year-round calvers and then the long calving seasons. How do we handle those? This is an example that we used in one year-round calver. First thing we do is pull the bull. The day we pull the bull, we want to evaluate the herd. And in this example, we evaluated the herd in March. That cow was pregnant. These cows were all pregnant. Some of them barely, some of them getting ready to go. Okay, we matched them with their calves. We got their pregnancy rate and we made our plan. Okay, and our plan was to cull the bad cows, bad performing, bad udder, bad disposition, and so forth. We held all those to the fall. We held those to the fall. We put a cedar in those two cows. One of those two, 7 days before we turned them out with a bull, and sold those and sold those. In 1 year, we went from year round to a 60-day, and we were able to maintain that. Okay, but we, of course, used pregnancy determination. We sold our open and late breds, and in this situation, the second year, these November calving cows got a cedar right before we turned the bull out, and we were able to maintain that for quite a period of time. Now, this producer did incorporate synchronization and AI, and so that's included in here. But this graph is only included to show that you can actually maintain a very short calving window for many years if you happen to make it a priority. As a sideline, this guy went from 1,725 pound cows to 1,250 pound cows. And so he was feeding a smaller unit and actually getting a higher level of productivity. And this just shows you he started off at 311 pounds of calf wean per cow exposed, and he's been holding. I still work with this guy. He's holding in that 530 to 560 range, which is kind of where his biological maximum is, and that's among the highest that I've ever worked with. If you take that added weight, multiply it, and then divide it out, it's about $850 additional revenue per cow. In addition to that, it's 40% lower cost of production, but that's not part of that deal. How do we handle the long calving seasons? This is an example of a spring calver, so targeted March and April. We had a few there at the end of February, some in April, a couple in May, and one in June. If you're going to set up for natural service, I'm just in this scenario, we did 5, and on this farm, we did 520 and pulled the bull on 8-1. If you were going to do AI, you would AI on the 20th turn the bulls out, then 10 days later, then remove the bulls on August the 1st. What I want you to do is to break this up into 3 groups. We got the easy group. That's these cows. Those are mature cows, calving early and good flesh. We got the hard cows. That's those 9 and any 2-year-old. Hard calvers are hard breeders. And then we've got the very hard cows. These are the ones that are actually calving at or after the start of the breeding season. Divide them into 3 different groups and manage them accordingly. So in the easy group, we're just going to turn those out with a bull or synchronize them for AI, whatever you want to do. You don't have to do anything special. When we do that, we had about 600 cows in this trial. When we did that, the easy group calved, got a lot of them pregnant, and they calved pretty early, and all we did was turn the bull out. In the hard group, okay, and you can see that down here, they're the late calving cows. We put a CIDR in for 7 days before we turn the bull out. Got a lot of them to calve early and got a lot of them pregnant. 2-year-olds, put a CIDR in, got a lot of them pregnant, got a lot of them to calve early. And the very hard, these are cows that calved during the start, or either right before or during the breeding season, but they were in the calving pasture. We waited 2 weeks, put a CIDR device in, left it in for 7 days, turned them out with a bull, and look at how they bred. So again, to reiterate, we turn the bull out on 520. No need to mess anymore with easy calving cows unless you're going to AI them. For your harder calving or harder breeding cows, I said calving, easy breeding, hard breeding. These are your April calving cows and all your 2-year-olds. Those are your hard breeding cows. CIDR in from the 12th to the 19th, the bull out on the 20th. For your very hard cows, they're still in the calving pasture. 2 weeks after they calve, put the CIDR in, leave it in for 7 days, put them over into the breeding pasture. These very hard cows are something we've concentrated on in the last 5 years. Got data on 177 mature cows from 19 locations. Put that CIDR in between 2 and 4 weeks after calving. We got almost 90% of them to calve, and they calved in the first 30 days instead of in the very late or the very hard group. This gives you an example of that. Back in 2013, Don Sarl and I just did this small project. This guy actually calved in February and March, so April and May were late for him. These are late and very late. At the end of April, that's when those cows calved. We put a CIDR in from the 14th to the 21st. That's when they calved the next year. Moved them up a full month. These May calvers, we put it in June 17th, pulled it out on the 24th. This cow did not read the book, but it actually ends up being exactly like our data. About 80% of them respond, and we move them up about 30 days. If you're going to do AI, your easy and hard cows, so those are your February, March, and April calvers, just 7-day co-sync with a CIDR. No problem. Don't worry about it. They'll get along really well. You can see that protocol. For your very hard cows, I'm telling you, don't try to AI them. Just put a CIDR in 2 weeks after they calve, pull it out, put them over with the bull. Get them moved up from May and June into April or March, and then that way the next year you can synchronize them AI. So those are our 6 checklists. Perform your BSE, vaccinate your herd, evaluate the nutrient status of your cows and feed accordingly. Prepare your yearling heifers. Get them to their target weight now. Vaccinate them now. Get them ready for breeding now so that you can maximize their opportunity to get bred early. If they get bred early as yearlings, you have a much lower problem as 2-year-olds. But even if they calve early as heifers, plan for your 2-year-olds and make sure you synchronize estrus. It's an absolute must for 2-year-olds. Put a CIDR device in them for 7 days before you turn the bull out in those cows. And then Plan your breeding season. Evaluate your calving and your status. Evaluate and match that with your production plan. If you're a feeder calf producer, do everything you can to shrink the calving season so that you have bigger groups of light calves to sell because you're going to make more money. And with that, Dr. Lemcooler, I have worn them out.
Very good, Dr. Anderson, and very timely. I think given the potential revenue that is in our calf crops is coming up the next few years, this is something that we need to continue to focus on. I think one of the questions, and you addressed it, pretty clearly, but I just want to have you reiterate it. When we are thinking about trying to use a synchronization option to make that calving window as tight as possible, there's a lot of concerns about bull power. And so, again, I guess just in general, if you're going to do this, what are just some good general recommendations to make sure that that bull is going to be able to do that work?
Yeah. So, number one, understand that it's been very thoroughly researched, not only by me, but by nearly every reproductive physiologist in the country, because we synchronize and we turn bulls out. And you think, oh, okay, well, that's not, but the return heats, you still have a lot of cows coming in heat over a short period of time on the return heats. In the trials that we did, in that MGA cedar trial that we did where we had 2,000 cows and we paid really, really close attention, it was in the discovery phase of this. So we had great concerns about bulls being able to handle, the pressure. And so we ran bull to cow ratios from as low as 1 to 23 all the way up to 1 to 42. And I was scared to death, Dr. Lemcooler, at 1 to 42. And none of those, the average was 91%. And it was not different than any of the others. I mean, it was a flat line, but I stacked the deck in my favor. They all got a BSE. They were all high pass. So it wasn't any marginal, there was no deferred bulls in there. No marginal, high pass, satisfactory, mature bulls is what we use. I know people that have turned in synchronized 30 heifers and turned in one 15-month-old bull. And that's a mistake. But that's not the bull's fault. That's our fault. The research shows the average bull can breed 6 cows a day.
And they're
Up
not
to
all
10.
going to come in on that day.
They are not all going to come in on the same day. And the first week of the breeding season is always the most exciting for that bull. And he's getting after it a whole lot more than, a month and a half from now. And so they do it does been very well researched. As long as you make sure they pass a BSE and you're not abusing the experience of the bull. So if they don't have much experience, don't trust that they can do it.
There's a question that came in, 55 cows, 2 bulls. They're each 3-year-olds. Breeding soundness exams are done. The bulls are kept together when not in with the cows. So they're managed together. Would you prefer that all the cows run with both bulls together in one herd, or would you rather see the cow herd split into 2 groups and 1 bull put in each? Does the competition of having multiple sires in with a group of cows help or hurt?
What a great question. Okay. With 55 to 60 cows is our nightmare. Right. Because that's right where you're in that breaking point between 1 and 2 or 3. The research and this a lot of this work was done in Australia, um, some in Canada. 2 bulls together is the worst possible management plan. What that ends up most often being in the lowest amount of pregnant females. And what happens is 2 bulls fight. One of those 2 bulls can often get hurt, and they are so concentrated on fighting that they don't breed cows. Or at least that's what they suggested in the paper. So in that situation with 55 cows, what the data shows is it's actually better to either split them into 2 groups, or if they're running in one group, use one bull for 3 weeks, pull him out, put the other bull in for 3 weeks, pull him out, put the first bull in for the last 3 weeks. And actually all the data that's looked at this, and there's not been a ton of trials, but everything that's looked at this shows that that's actually the method that maximizes fertility and minimizes risk. Because if you got one bull that's fertile and one bull even that's marginal in libido, maybe he's cranking out semen, but he's not interested. If you're rotating those bulls, you stimulate more libido and you mitigate the risk of the lower fertility bull. And so in that situation, if possible, I would put one bull in and rotate him every 2 to 3 weeks. That seems like a lot of work, but that is the best way to mitigate the risk of pregnancy. Great question. Great question.
Yep. Yep. Good question. Well, Dr. Anderson, I don't see any additional questions, so you must have hit it right off. And just a comment in, no questions, but just appreciate the information and always enjoy listening to Les as well as seeing your presentation. So great job.
Well, I hope it was a little different, but it kind of gets to be the same. We got to figure out when to pull the bulls. In some cases.
So just as a reminder, Dr. Bullock wanted me to share that our next program is April the 11th. Dr. Arnold and myself will do a health update as well as review the internal parasite field study that we did. And the CAPE code is repro efficiency for this evening's program. You put that on the form for the speaker. Again, the county agents approve these educational programs, so you need to make sure that this is a qualifying educational program with your county agent, and forms are returned to your county agent, or you can get that CAPE form from your county agent. Again, do not send those forms to Dr. Bullock. They need to go to your county agent since it's a county cost share program. With that, we want to thank all of you for joining us again this evening, and we look forward to seeing you soon.